What if the happiest day of your life was also the day your entire world shattered? Imagine this. You are 7 months pregnant, walking down the aisle towards your millionaire husband, the man you adore. Your wedding is a fairy tale, a dream come true. But then, you overhear a conversation not meant for your ears, a conversation that reveals your perfect husband is not who you think he is. And your marriage is built on a devastating lie. This isn't just a story of cheating, it's a story of a woman who lost everything, only to discover the unbreakable strength she never knew she had. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see this community come together. If you enjoy powerful stories, subscribe and hit the bell. Now, let's dive in. The late afternoon sun of October, a perfect honeyed gold, streamed through the arched windows of the Croft family's ancestral estate. It was the kind of light poets wrote about, the kind that made everything it touched seem blessed. For Selene, standing in the bridal suite, it felt like a celestial endorsement of the day she had dreamed of since she was a little girl, sketching fantasy castles in her notebook. The dress, a cascade of ivory silk and delicate lace designed by Vera Wang herself, felt like a second skin. It was a gift from Adrien, of course. Everything was a gift from Adrien. The Croft estate, the 10-carat diamond on her finger that felt heavier than its physical weight, the very air of opulent tranquility she breathed. It was all part of the Adrien Croft experience. She smoothed a hand over the gentle, pronounced curve of her belly. 7 months. Their son, their little Noah, was nestled safely inside, a tiny, perfect promise of their future. Adrien had been ecstatic when they found out it was a boy. "A Croft heir!" he'd boomed, his voice echoing with a pride that seemed almost primal. "My father will be overjoyed." Selene smiled at her reflection. Her face, usually defined by a quiet thoughtfulness, was illuminated with a joy so pure it felt fragile. She was an architect, a woman who understood foundations and structures. She believed in the structure of her life with Adrien. He was charismatic, ambitious and devastatingly handsome, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that could soften into a gentle harbor just for her. He had swept into her life, a whirlwind of power and affection, and had built her this gilded cage, a place so beautiful she never wanted to leave. "You look breathtaking, Sel," Maya, her maid of honor and best friend since college, said from the doorway. Her eyes were misty. "Seriously, like something out of a magazine." "I feel like I'm in a dream," Selene confessed, her voice a whisper. "Well, don't wake up. This dream cost more than my apartment building." Maya joked, but a flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Maya had always been more grounded, more skeptical of the sheer scale of Adrien's wealth. She saw the power imbalance more clearly than Selena, who was blinded by love. "It's time," Maya said softly. As she walked towards the grand staircase that would lead her to the garden ceremony, Selene felt a pang of nostalgia. She clutched the small beaded purse in her hand. Inside was her something old, her grandfather's small brass compass. He had been a sailor, a man who navigated by the stars, and he'd always told her, "Know your true north, Lena Bean." Her heart swelled. Adrien was her true north now. The ceremony was a blur of scented roses, classical music from a string quartet, and the hundreds of smiling faces of high society. She saw Adrien waiting for her at the altar, looking impossibly dashing in his Tom Ford tuxedo. His smile was dazzling, a lighthouse guiding her home. She locked eyes with him, and the world fell away. It was just them. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with glittering chandeliers and a history that dripped from the frescoed ceiling. They danced their first dance, a slow, swaying waltz to a song Adrien had had commissioned just for them. He held her close, his hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. "I love you, Mrs. Croft," he murmured into her hair, "more than you'll ever know." I love you too, she breathed, burying her face in his chest, inhaling the familiar, expensive scent of his cologne. An hour later, amid the clinking of champagne glasses and polite laughter, Selene felt a sudden, sharp need to sit down. Her ankles were swelling, and the baby was performing a vigorous gymnastics routine. She excused herself, promising to return in a few minutes. As she made her way towards a quieter anteroom, she remembered the compass. In the rush of the ceremony, she'd left her purse in the bridal suite. She wanted it with her. It was a silly, sentimental thought, but it felt important. Instead of taking the grand staircase, she took a staff corridor, a shortcut she and Adrien had used before. It led past the estate's old library, a room Adrien's father, Gregory Croft, used as his personal study. The door was slightly ajar, and the low murmur of voices drifted out. She recognized Adrien's voice immediately. He sounded different. Not the warm, adoring husband from the dance floor, but the sharp, decisive CEO she'd heard on conference calls. Curiosity piqued, she slowed her steps, her satin heels silent on the plush runner. The merger is contingent on this, Vivian. You know that. Vivienne. Celine's brow furrowed. Vivienne Laurent was the daughter of Marcus Laurent, a rival tech mogul Adrien had been trying to forge an alliance with for over a year. She was beautiful, sharp, and from the same blue-blooded world as Adrien. Selene had always felt a prickle of insecurity around her. I know. Vivienne's voice was a low, sultry purr. But your father was very clear. The alliance isn't just between Croft Industries and Laurent Global. It's between the families. A bond. Selene's hand froze on the wall. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, began to seep into her bones. And we're creating that bond, Adrien said. There was a rustling sound, like expensive fabric. My father is satisfied. He sees the wedding, he sees the pregnant wife. She's suitable, docile, the perfect image for the company. No one will look twice. Suitable, docile. The words struck Selene like physical blows. She wasn't his partner, she was a prop, an image. And the baby? Vivienne asked. The little heir? A beat of silence. Then Adrien's chilling reply. He'll be a Croft. That's all that matters. He secures the dynasty. Selene did her part. Honestly, once he's born, her role becomes largely ceremonial. The air left Selene's lungs. The gilded cage she had loved so much suddenly felt cold and sharp, its bars pressing in on her. Then came the sound that shattered her world completely. A soft, distinct moan of pleasure. Vivienne's, followed by a low chuckle from Adrien. Patience, darling, he said, his voice thick with a desire Selene hadn't heard since their own early, passionate days. The reception is long. I'll come find you later. Don't wear that dress for me. Promise? Vivienne cooed. I promise. Selene stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. She felt a wave of nausea so intense she had to grip the wall to keep from collapsing. The baby kicked, a sharp, insistent reminder of the life inside her. The life Adrien had just called a tool to secure his dynasty. She saw it all with horrifying clarity. The whirlwind romance, the perfect proposal, his insistence on a quick wedding before the baby was born. It wasn't a love story. It was a business transaction. She was the broodmare, bought and paid for to provide a veneer of respectability and an heir, while he solidified a corporate merger by sleeping with another woman. On their wedding day, the pain was a physical entity, a shard of ice piercing her heart. Betrayal wasn't a strong enough word. This was a complete and utter negation of her reality. Her love, her trust, their future. It was all a meticulously crafted illusion. Tears streamed down her face, silent and hot. For a moment, she wanted to burst through the door, to scream, to claw at their faces, to expose them in front of the whole world. But then, a different feeling began to surface, rising from the icy depths of her shock. It was cold, hard, and utterly unfamiliar. It was rage, a calculated, silent fury. He called her docile. He called her suitable. He thought she was a prop in his play. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her movements jerky. She looked down at her beautiful dress, at the diamond on her finger, at her swollen belly. They were all part of the costume, and she was done playing her part. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. Know your true north. Her true north wasn't Adrien. It never had been. Her true north was the child kicking inside her. Her son. And she would be damned if she let him be raised as a pawn in the cold, cruel world of the Crofts. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled, but her resolve was hardening into steel. She opened the voice memo app and pressed record. Then, holding her breath, she crept closer to the library door. Angling the phone's microphone towards the gap, she would not be docile. She would not be ceremonial. She would be the architect of his downfall. The recording felt like a live grenade in her hand. Selene stood in the corridor, her heart hammering a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to run until the pristine lawns of the Croft estate were a distant memory. But another, colder instinct took over. The architect in her, the one who understood that a demolition required careful planning, held her in place. She needed more than just a recording of their post-coital whispers. She needed to understand the full scope of the contract she had unknowingly signed with her life. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she smoothed down her dress, wiped the last traces of tears from her cheeks, and composed her face into a mask of serene bridal bliss. She practiced a small, slightly tired smile in the reflection of a silver platter left on a side table. It was the most difficult performance of her life. She walked back into the ballroom. The music was louder now, the atmosphere more boisterous. She spotted Adrien across the room, laughing with a group of investors, Vivian's father among them. He caught her eye and gave her a brilliant smile, raising his glass in a toast. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost breathtaking. He was an artist of deceit. Selene smiled back, a perfect, loving smile that didn't reach her frozen eyes. She made her way to Maya, who was watching her with a concerned frown. "You okay?" Maya asked, her voice low. "You were gone for a while. You look pale." Selene couldn't speak the truth. Not yet. The words were too toxic. They would contaminate Maya's own happiness for the day. Just a bit overwhelmed. She lied, placing a hand on her stomach. "Noah's being a little acrobat tonight. Can you do me a huge favor?" "Anything. My purse is still in the bridal suite. Could you get it for me? And maybe find Gregory Croft's briefcase? I think he left it in the study. Adrien mentioned needing a document from it." The lie came easily, slick with newfound purpose. Maya's brow furrowed. "Gregory's briefcase? Why?" "Adrien needs the finalized Laurent Global merger proposal. He wants to give Marcus Laurent a signed copy tonight as a wedding gift." "A gesture," Selene improvised, the details flowing from a place of pure, cold invention. "He asked me to get it, but I just can't face those stairs again." It was a plausible power player move Adrien would make. Maya, accustomed to the bizarre ways of the ultra-rich, nodded. "Okay, weirdo. One briefcase coming up. Stay off your feet." As Maya disappeared, Selene moved through the crowd, a ghost at her own wedding feast. She accepted congratulations, smiled for photos, and allowed Adrien to pull her in for a kiss. A chaste public peck that felt like a brand of ownership. His touch made her skin crawl. Maya returned minutes later, looking flustered. She handed Selene her small purse. "Got your bag, but the briefcase." "Sel, the study door was locked, and I could have sworn I heard voices inside." Selene's blood ran cold. Of course, they were still in there. "It's fine," she said, her voice tight. "Don't worry about it." She now had the recording on her phone, which was tucked safely inside the purse with her grandfather's compass. But she knew the document she'd invented. The merger proposal was the key. It would lay out the terms, the timelines, the real nature of the bond between the families. She needed to wait. The night stretched before her, an eternity of charades. She watched Adrien, studying him as if he were a stranger. She saw the flick of his eyes towards the library corridor. She saw Vivian emerge 20 minutes later, her lipstick perfectly reapplied, a triumphant, secretive smile playing on her lips. They thought they were invisible. They thought she was blind. The reception finally wound down in the early hours of the morning. The last of the guests departed, leaving behind a ballroom that smelled of wilted flowers and stale champagne. The staff moved silently, clearing the debris of the lavish affair. "Tired, my love?" Adrien asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his hands coming to rest on their son. "Exhausted," she replied, her body rigid. "Let's go up. Our life begins now." The bridal suite was a parody of romance. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, and candles flickered on every surface. It looked like a tomb. As Adrien shed his tuxedo jacket, Selene walked over to the large mahogany desk in the sitting area. "What are you doing?" he asked, unbuttoning his shirt. "Just looking for some aspirin," she lied, opening a drawer. Her hands were searching for something else entirely. Adrien was meticulously organized. He kept copies of all major contracts in his home office safes. Surely, a deal this monumental? Her fingers brushed against a leather-bound folder tucked at the back of the bottom drawer. It was unmarked. Her heart leaped. She pulled it out. "What's that?" Adrien's voice was casual, but she detected a new edge to it. She opened the folder. The top page read, "Project Dynasty, a proposal for the strategic alliance of Croft Industries and Laurent Global." Her eyes scanned the dense text. It was all there, laid out in cold corporate language. Clauses about consolidating market share, leveraging assets, and then a section titled Familial Integration. It detailed the expected union, the strengthening of the bond through social and personal ties. It didn't name names, but it didn't have to. The final page was a signatory sheet. It was signed by Gregory Croft, Marcus Laurent, and Adrien. It was dated 6 months ago, 2 weeks before Adrien had proposed to her. She felt the last vestiges of her love curdle into something akin to hate. "Selene, put that down!" Adrien's voice was low and dangerous. The mask was gone. The charming husband had been replaced by the ruthless CEO. She turned to face him, the folder held in her hand like a shield. "Docile," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Was that your word, or your father's?" Adrien's face went pale. He took a step towards her. "You don't know what you're talking about. Her role becomes largely ceremonial once the heir is born." She quoted his own words back at him, her voice dripping with a venom she didn't know she possessed. Realization, then fury, flashed in his eyes. He lunged for the folder, but she was faster, stepping back. "How?" he snarled. "You left the library door open," she said simply. "You should be more careful when you're closing your deals." She saw the sequence of emotions on his face. Disbelief, followed by a flicker of fear, quickly replaced by arrogant dismissal. He thought he could manage this. He thought he could manage her. "Selene, listen to me," he said, his voice dropping into a placating tone. "You're pregnant. You're emotional. You're misunderstanding a business conversation." "Am I?" She held up her small purse. "I don't think the recording I made will misunderstand it. I'm sure my lawyer will find it perfectly clear. Vivian moans quite clearly, you'll be pleased to know. It's excellent audio quality." His face turned to stone. The color drained from it completely. He stared at her, and for the first time, she saw him for what he was. A man trapped in a cage of his own. A cage built by his father's ambition. but she felt no pity. Only a vast, empty chasm where her love used to be. "What do you want?" he finally whispered, the words ragged. "Money? Name your price. I'll give you anything." That was the moment she knew she had won. He thought he could buy her silence, just as he had bought her as a wife. "I want nothing from you, Adrien," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound power. She walked over to the closet, the one filled with designer clothes he had bought for her. She pulled out the simple canvas bag she had arrived with all those months ago. She began to pack her old things. A worn copy of Jane Eyre, a framed photo of her and Maya, the few clothes that were truly hers. "What are you doing? You can't leave," he said, his voice rising in panic. "Think of the optics, the press. My father will—" "I don't care about your father," she cut him off, turning to face him, her hand on the doorknob. "You have your deal. You have your dynasty. And you have Vivian. You've made your choice." She held up the folder. "This, however, is my severance package, my copy." Before he could react, she opened the door and walked out of the suite, leaving him standing amidst the romantic ruins of their wedding night. She didn't look back. She walked down the grand staircase, past the wilting flowers and the ghosts of her shattered dreams. The night air was cool on her hot cheeks. She didn't have a car, a plan, or a destination. All she had was a canvas bag, a damning recording, a secret contract, and the sun growing inside her. As she walked down the long, manicured driveway of the Croft estate, the gravel crunching under her feet, she pulled out her grandfather's compass. In the moonlight, the needle trembled for a moment before settling, pointing resolutely north. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she knew which way she was going. The bus ride was a rattling, anonymous journey into the gray light of dawn. Selene had used the cash from her purse to buy a ticket to the farthest destination on the board. Port Blossom, a small coastal town she'd only seen on a map, chosen for its obscurity and its distance from the glittering metropolis that held her past. She sat with her head against the cool glass of the window, the damning folder pressed against her side, watching the city lights bleed into sprawling suburbs and then, finally, into the quiet, rolling countryside. She didn't cry. The shock had cauterized her sorrow, leaving behind a raw, resolute numbness. Port Blossom was exactly what she needed. Quiet, unassuming, and weathered by sea salt and time. The air smelled of brine and fried fish. Weather-beaten fishing boats bobbed in the harbor, their reflections a watercolor smudge on the gray water. It was the antithesis of the Croft estate's polished grandeur. It was real. She found a small furnished apartment for rent above a closed bakery, paying the first 2 months' rent in cash. It was sparse, with mismatched furniture and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was a sanctuary. It was hers. The first thing she did was buy a cheap, prepaid phone and a lockbox for the folder, and her old phone containing the recording. She hid the box under a loose floorboard in the closet. The first few weeks were a blur of survival. Morning sickness, a constant companion, was now compounded by the heavy weight of loneliness and fear. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, the memory of Adrien's voice in the library replaying in her mind. The betrayal was a living thing, a phantom that shared her small bed. She lived frugally, her dwindling cash a constant nagging worry. She bought her food from the local market, her clothes from a second-hand shop. Her pregnancy was becoming more pronounced, and the stares of the townspeople, though not unkind, were a reminder of her solitary situation. She was an anomaly in a town where everyone knew everyone else's history. One day, overwhelmed by a sudden wave of despair, she sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, tears finally beginning to fall. Her son deserved more than this. He deserved more than a mother who was running on fumes, paralyzed by the past. "Tough tide today, dear." Selene looked up to see an older woman with kind, crinkled eyes and a cloud of white hair. She was holding a tray of steaming muffins. "I'm Eleanor Laurent," the woman said, sitting down beside her. She wasn't related to the other Lawrence, a fact she found endlessly amusing. It was a cruel, cosmic joke. Eleanor ran the town's most popular cafe, the Daily Grind. "You're new here. I see you walk by every morning. You always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Something in Eleanor's gentle, no-nonsense demeanor made Selene's defenses crumble. For the first time since she'd left, she told someone a part of her story. She kept the details vague. A bad breakup, a controlling ex, the need for a fresh start. Eleanor listened patiently, nodding. "The world breaks everyone," she said, quoting Hemingway without realizing it. "And afterward, many are strong at the broken places." "What did you do before all this?" "I'm an architect," Selene said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. It felt like a lifetime ago. "An architect?" Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Well, I'll be. This old town could use an architect. Our historic pier is falling apart, and the town council's plans for it are about as creative as a cardboard box." That small conversation planted a seed. The next day, Selene walked down to the pier. It was a beautiful, dilapidated structure, a skeleton of its former self. She spent hours there, sketching in a cheap notebook she'd bought. She didn't just sketch a repair, she reimagined it. A new blueprint began to form, not just for the pier, but for herself. She drew a multi-use community space, with stalls for fishermen to sell their catch, benches for locals to gather, a small, safe play area for children, and planters for a community garden. She incorporated sustainable materials and designs that honored the town's history while looking towards its future. The project consumed her. It was a way to build something beautiful out of something broken. It was a metaphor for her own life. She worked out of her tiny apartment, her drafting table a piece of plywood set on 2 sawhorses. She poured all her training, her passion, and her pain into the drawings. This was who she was. Not Mrs. Adrien Croft, the docile wife, but Selene Quinn, the architect. Meanwhile, she knew Adrien would be searching for her. She had cut off all contact with Maya, sending only a single cryptic text from her burner phone. "I'm safe. Don't look for me. I'll explain one day." It was cruel, but necessary. Adrien would go to Maya first, and Selene couldn't risk her friend getting caught in the crossfire. Her fears were confirmed one afternoon when she saw a sleek, black car with tinted windows cruise slowly down the main street. It was the kind of car that didn't belong in Port Blossom. It circled the town twice before disappearing. It was a probe, a scout. He was using his vast resources, sweeping the grid, searching for the woman who had dared to walk away. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach. But her resolve held. She was not the same woman who had stood in that corridor. With her peer proposal complete, she took a deep breath and walked into a town council meeting. She was a pregnant, unknown woman with no credentials to her name but the drawings she held in her hand. She stood before the council of gruff fishermen and skeptical shop owners, and she presented her vision. She spoke with a passion and clarity that surprised even herself. She wasn't just talking about wood and nails. She was talking about community, legacy, and building a future. They were stunned into silence. Her plan was brilliant, heartfelt, and economically sound. It was everything they wanted, but didn't know how to ask for. The council approved her proposal in principle, commissioning a formal feasibility study. It wasn't a paid job yet, but it was a foothold. It was a beginning. For the first time in months, Selene felt a flicker of genuine hope. She was building again. That evening, as she was leaving the town hall, a man was waiting for her in the shadows. Her heart seized with terror, thinking it was one of Adrien's men. "Selene?" The voice was familiar. She squinted into the gloom. It was Marcus, Adrien's best man. He looked haggard, His expensive suit rumpled. "What do you want?" she asked, her body tensing, ready to run. "Adrien is losing his mind," Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. "He sent me. Not to bring you back, but to talk. He's not sleeping. He's not eating. His father is threatening to disinherit him. The Laurent deal is on the verge of collapse because Vivian is furious about the scandal of you leaving." "A scandal of my making? That's rich!" Selene scoffed. "He knows he messed up, Selene. Terribly," Marcus pleaded. "He's terrified. Not just for the business, but for you. For the baby. He wants to talk. No threats, no tricks. Just a conversation. He's willing to come here, on your terms." Selene looked at Marcus's desperate face. She thought of the black car. The hunt was over. He had found her. She could keep running, but for how long? Her son would be born soon. He deserved a father, even a flawed one. More importantly, he deserved to be financially secure, safe from the toxic influence of the Croft dynasty. The time for hiding was over. The time for negotiation had begun. "Tell him he can meet me," she said, her voice steady and firm. "At the Daily Grind Cafe, tomorrow, at noon. He comes alone. And Marcus," she added, her eyes as hard as the sea-worn pebbles on the beach, "tell him to bring his best offer, because my terms will not be cheap." The bell above the door of the Daily Grind jingled, announcing Adrien's arrival. He looked utterly out of place. His tailored cashmere coat and $1,000 shoes were an affront to the cozy, mismatched charm of the cafe. But it wasn't his clothes that struck Selene. It was his face. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes that even his residual tan couldn't hide. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a raw, hollowed-out anxiety. He saw her sitting in a booth by the window, a cup of herbal tea steaming in front of her. She didn't stand. She simply watched him approach, her expression unreadable. Her pregnancy was now impossible to hide. The swell of her stomach was a silent, powerful testament to everything that lay between them. He slid into the booth opposite her, his movements hesitant. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The air crackled with unspoken words, with the ghosts of love and betrayal. "Selene," he began, his voice raspy. "You look, well, I'm building a life here," she said, her tone level. It was not an invitation for small talk. "You wanted to talk, so talk." He flinched at her coldness. I'm sorry." The words sounded inadequate, pathetic, even to him. "What I did, it was unforgivable. There's no excuse." "No, there isn't," she agreed. "But there was a reason. Project Dynasty, I believe it was called. I read the whole thing. It was very thorough." Adrien's gaze dropped to the table. He looked like a man confessing to a crime. "My father, he's been planning that merger since I was in college. He raised me for it. He said love was a luxury, but legacy was an obligation. He saw you, and he saw perfection. Beautiful, intelligent, from a good family but not a powerful one. No messy alliances. You were the perfect, unimpeachable choice to be the mother of the next Croft. He cornered me. He said the entire future of the company depended on a bond with the Lawrence, and Vivian was the price. So you decided to have it all," Selene finished for him, her voice laced with ice. "The respectable wife and heir, and the corporate mistress on the side. My congratulations on your ambition, Adrien. It's truly boundless." "It wasn't like that," he said desperately. "I did love you, Selene. I still do. In my own twisted, broken way, I love you. I told myself it was just business. I separated it in my mind. I thought I could keep those worlds apart, protect you from it." "By having sex with her at our wedding?" Selene's voice was dangerously quiet. "While I was carrying your son? You weren't protecting me, Adrien. You were using me. My body, my love, my trust. It was all just capital for you to spend. The truth of her words hung between them, undeniable and ugly. He had no defense. "What do you want to fix this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I'll call off the deal with Laurent. I'll walk away from my father, from everything. We can start over." Selene almost laughed. It was a bitter, painful sound. "Start over? There is no we, Adrien. You burned that bridge. You dynamited it. This isn't a negotiation for our marriage. That is over. This is a negotiation for our divorce, and for the future of our son." He visibly deflated, the last glimmer of hope dying in his eyes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, what are your terms?" This was the moment she had been preparing for. She had spent sleepless nights strategizing, thinking like the ruthless CEO he had taught her to be. "First," she began, leaning forward, her eyes locked on his. "Our son will have my last name. Quinn. He will not be a Croft. He will not be a pawn in your father's dynasty." Adrien recoiled as if struck. "Selene, no, he's my son. The heir." "He is my son," she corrected him fiercely. "And he will not be sacrificed on the altar of Croft Industries. That is non-negotiable." He saw the steel in her eyes and, after a tense silence, gave a slow, defeated nod. "Second," she continued, pressing her advantage, "you will establish a trust fund for him. A significant one. $10 million. Adrien's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. It was a fraction of his worth. "But," she added, "I will be the sole trustee. The funds cannot be touched by you, your father, or anyone from your family, for any reason, until Noah is 25 years old. My lawyers will draft an ironclad agreement that firewalls him completely from your financial and familial influence." He swallowed hard. She was systematically stripping him of every ounce of control, the one thing he and his father valued above all else. "Agreed," he rasped. "Third, you will not contest the divorce on any grounds. The official reason cited in all legal documents and public statements will be your infidelity." This was the blow that landed hardest. It wasn't about money. It was about pride. The pristine, powerful Croft name would be publicly tarnished. Gregory would be apoplectic. "Selene, please," he begged. "Think of the press, the scandal. It will ruin the family name." "Your actions ruined it," she retorted. "You just did it behind closed doors. I'm simply opening the door. You built your empire on an image of integrity. It's time for a market correction. The world will know exactly why I left you." He stared at her, a strange mix of horror and awe on his face. This was not the gentle, loving woman he had married. This was a queen, forged in the fires of his betrayal, dictating the terms of his surrender. "And finally," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, "if you want to be a father to him, a real father, not just a name on a birth certificate, you will have that chance. You can have visitation. You can be in his life. But it will be on my terms. Here, in Port Blossom. You will come into his world. He will never be forced to enter yours." She was offering him a sliver of redemption, a path to fatherhood, stripped of all the power and privilege he was used to. It was the only thing he truly wanted, and the only thing she could graciously give. Tears welled in Adrien's eyes. They were not the manipulative tears of a man trying to win sympathy, but the genuine, heartbroken tears of a man who had lost everything that truly mattered. "Okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, okay, Selene, whatever you want." She sat back, the immense tension draining from her. It was done. She had protected her son. She had secured their future. She had claimed her power. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours tomorrow," she said, her voice purely business again. She stood up, her hand resting on her belly. "The next time I see you, Adrien, I expect it will be at the hospital. I'll let you know when your son is born." She turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving him alone in the booth, a millionaire who had just discovered the true cost of his choices. As she stepped out into the crisp, salty air of Port Blossom, she didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel vengeful. She just felt free. The demolition was complete. Now she could finally begin to build. 4 months later, Noah Quinn was born with a healthy cry and his mother's determined eyes. The delivery room was quiet, filled only with the supportive presence of Maya, whom Selene had finally called, and the gentle guidance of the local doctor. Adrien was not there. Selene had sent him a text message with the news, as promised, but had made it clear that this moment was hers alone. Holding her son for the first time, Selene felt the last, fractured pieces of her old life click into a new and profound whole. The pain, the betrayal, the rage, it all melted away in the overwhelming, fierce love she felt for this tiny, perfect human. He was her true north. He was her reason. He was her masterpiece. Life in Port Blossom took on a new rhythm, paced by feedings, diaper changes, and the soft gurgles of a contented baby. The divorce was finalized quickly and quietly, just as she had dictated. The news of Adrien Croft's infidelity, confirmed in a sterile joint statement, sent a brief ripple through the financial world before being replaced by the next scandal. The Croft-Laurent merger collapsed spectacularly. Vivienne Laurent, unwilling to be tied to a damaged brand, walked away, and Marcus Laurent, seeing the rot within the Croft dynasty, pulled his support. Gregory Croft's grand plan had crumbled into dust. Selene's own project, however, was thriving. The town, buoyed by her vision and a surprising state grant she had helped secure, had officially commissioned her as the lead architect for the pier renovation. Quinn Architecture, currently operating out of her living room, had its first major contract. She worked while Noah slept, the baby monitor beside her drafting table. Her designs were filled with a light and purpose that had been absent from her earlier corporate work. She was building not for prestige or profit, but for people, for community. 2 months after Noah was born, Adrien came to Port Blossom. He didn't arrive in a black car, but in a modest rental sedan. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking more like a man than a magnate. He brought with him not an expensive gift, but a simple hand-carved wooden boat for his son. Their first meeting was in the park. It was awkward, tentative. Selene watched, her heart a tight knot of apprehension, as Adrien held his son for the first time. She saw the wonder and the profound regret in his eyes. He was clumsy, unsure, but gentle. He started visiting every other weekend. He stayed in the town's only motel. He didn't try to win Selene back. He didn't talk about his old life. He focused solely on Noah. He learned to change a diaper, to warm a bottle, to recognize the difference between a hungry cry and a tired one. He walked with Selene along the beach, pushing the stroller, the two of them maintaining a careful, respectful distance. During one of these walks, he finally told her what had happened. "My father disowned me," he said, his eyes on the horizon. "When the Laurent deal fell through, he said I had failed in my one and only duty. He cut me off completely." "I'm sorry," Selene said, and she was surprised to find that she meant it. "Don't be," Adrien replied with a wry, tired smile. "It was the most liberating day of my life. I'm on my own now. I started a small tech consulting firm. Just me and 2 other guys. We're working on an app to help nonprofits manage their logistics. It's the first thing I've ever built that I'm actually proud of." Selene looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the flicker of a new man emerging from the wreckage of the old one. The redemption wasn't for her. It was for him. He was breaking ground on a new life, just as she was. A year later, the new Port Blossom Community Pier had its grand opening. It was a beautiful, sunny day. The structure was magnificent, a sweeping curve of sustainable timber and recycled steel that looked both modern and timeless. It was filled with laughing children, local vendors, and the proud townspeople who had helped build it. Selene stood to the side, holding a toddling Noah's hand, watching her vision come to life. Maya was beside her, beaming with pride. Across the pier, she saw Adrien. He wasn't with them. He was just another face in the crowd, watching his son take wobbly steps towards his mother. He caught Selene's eye and gave her a small, genuine smile. A smile not of possession or persuasion, but of respect. She smiled back. There was no romance there, no rekindling of a dead flame. But there was something else, a fragile, hard-won peace, an understanding. They were no longer husband and wife, but they were architects of a different kind of structure, a family, redesigned and rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, forgiveness, and the shared love for their son. Selene knelt, her eyes level with her child's. "Look, Noah," she whispered, pointing towards the sparkling water and the endless horizon. "We built that." She had lost a fairy tale wedding and a millionaire husband. She had been betrayed, broken, and left with nothing. But standing here today, on this pier she had designed, with the son she adored, in the community she had helped to heal, she knew she hadn't lost anything of value. She had found it all. She had found her true north. And she was finally, truly, home. Selene's story is a powerful reminder that our deepest betrayals can often lead to our greatest transformations. She was stripped of a life she thought she wanted, only to build one she truly needed, on her own terms. Her strength wasn't in public revenge, but in quiet resolve, strategic intelligence, and the fierce, protective love for her child. It's a story about finding your own true north, even when you're lost in the storm. What did you think of Selene's final decision? Was it justice, or mercy, or both? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience, redemption, and rebuilding moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And for more emotional stories that explore the complexities of the human heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Thank you for watching.